This episode is proudly supported by Powerhouse Parramatta.
Powerhouse Parramatta will open in 2025. The new museum will be the largest in New South Wales and is determined to offer the very best in hospitality. Perhaps your business can be part of defining a food and beverage offering which is expected to cater to 2 million visitors a year. This incredible opportunity for operators includes retail food and beverage, in-house residential catering, events and other hospitality ventures, encapsulating the diversity of cuisines and cultures that make Western Sydney so exciting. Interested to learn more? Powerhouse invites food and beverage operators to a briefing on Tuesday, 8th of August. For more information and to register for this exclusive briefing, go to powerhouse.com.au.
That's the point of restaurants is, you bring people together. It's a meeting point, but it's also, it's an event. I love just restaurants full stop. I love eating out. I do to my partner's detriment, financial detriment. We eat out a lot. And that's just what I love.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. In the past, hotel dining in Australia was seen as second tier to standalone restaurants, but over the years, great operators have challenged the myth with incredible offerings. But what are the challenges and benefits of running a restaurant as part of a hotel? Rhys Connell is the new head chef of the Gantry at Pier 1, Sydney. Rhys, how are you?
Good, thanks, Anthony. How are you?
I'm good. You've got an exciting new role in Sydney. How did the gig come about?
So last year, I just finished working at Society in Melbourne. I kind of started looking abroad, and I always knew I kind of wanted to come back to Sydney. And then just through a few different avenues, I got contacted about the role because Tom had left the Gantry. So I came down. At first I was a little bit hesitant because it was a hotel, and I didn't really know what I was getting into at the time. So I came down. I did a few days trial stay in the hotel, and I was just really impressed by the bones of the hotel and the restaurant. I accepted the position and started in January.
It's an interesting hesitancy, isn't it, in perception of hotel restaurants. Do you think that has changed or is changing?
Look, I think that's something that we need to, as a dining public in Australia, change. You spend time in Europe. The best restaurants in Europe, especially in France and, in Paris, are inside of hotels. So I think they're onto something, obviously, and I guess that's kind of something we're just waiting to catch up on here.
You mentioned that you were really impressed with the bones when you first sort of got the opportunity to explore the opportunity. Tell us about what impressed you about the Gantry and the operations there.
Well, being inside the Pier 1 Hotel, it's a lifestyle hotel, and it's directly underneath the Harbour Bridge. The first thing was the location and just how beautiful. Like, it's on Sydney, it's in Sydney Harbour, really. So that was the first thing that impressed me, but also the area at Dawes Point. It's an arts district, and it's really insulated from Sydney as a whole, I think, because, you're 5 minutes from Circular Quay, but you're also 5 minutes from Barangaroo, but it feels like you're nowhere in the city. So actually arriving there and spending time in that area, I felt, and talking to locals as well, people just kind of said, we're craving a restaurant like the Gantry, like what we're trying to produce now. And I thought, that's something coming from Melbourne. I thought that's something that I can do here. And I thought this is what I want to do as well.
I want to explore what you are doing there and how you're expressing sort of your vision on a plate. But take me back to when you were young. What sort of role did food play in your family?
So my family grew up in Newcastle. And I've got two brothers, and both my parents, they owned a small business. So they originally started the small business so they could have free time and spend a lot of time with us growing up as young adults. But it kind of had the opposite effect. They spent a lot of time working on the business and keeping it afloat. So it kind of had it was great because we got to see our parents a lot, but it meant that they weren't there for a lot of the sort of cooking and whatnot. So being the oldest brother, I took on a lot of cooking in the afternoons for my brothers, and I kind of got interested in food through watching like daytime cooking TV. Your Huey's, your Ready Steady Cook. That was sort of my first look at food. But like when I think about it, my parents, they used to take us to restaurants. So I'd been dining in restaurants my whole entire life. My parents' friends were all hospitality owners and pure restaurant people. Extended family were chefs. Even my dad had a crack at being a chef before he became a postman and before they opened their business. So I was always kind of heading in a hospitality direction. I always knew I wanted to do something that used my hands primarily. So it was either going to be an artist or something, something like that. But yeah, that was sort of my first interaction with food. But I picked it up as a hospitality course in high school, and I had a really, really good teacher, Carly Boyle. She put a lot of emphasis on me being in the kitchen, and I think she realised, she saw it before I did, that I was going to be a chef, and she pushed me in that direction. And I was still at school playing football with my mates, and she kind of she had it in the back of her head that I think Rhys is a chef, and she signed me up to absolutely everything cooking. She sent me to Sydney to do a week's intensive course on cooking when I was in year 12. And I as soon as I put a chef jacket on, I was like, yeah, I think this is what I want to do too.
Where did you start your career? Do you have any stories of the first couple of years in a commercial kitchen?
The first couple of years in a commercial kitchen were, I started at a restaurant in Newcastle called Dimitri's, which is a small family-run restaurant. When I was in year 11, and I was just working there after school. But Dimitri was the owner, and he just put a lot of emphasis on me cooking pasta and things, and it was very, very simple. It wasn't handmade pastas or anything like that. It was just putting ingredients together. I was there for maybe about 6 months, and then I did work experience at the Crown Hotel in Newcastle. And they said to me there, we'd be happy to take you on just a few nights a week as well. So I started working there. But it wasn't really until 2009 when I met Tim Montgomery. He was the head chef at Bacchus. He just started the week that I walked into the kitchen. And that was part of school placement. And he, like it seemed to be a bit of a reoccurring thing where people were like, I think that you do really well at this. And he was one of the people that was like, right, you got to stay with us. You've got to work in my kitchen. He originally he employed me as sort of, I was doing desserts, but also washing dishes at the same time. And then he was like, right, it's time to be an apprentice. So I signed up as an apprentice the day after Australia Day, 2010, after we'd finished high school. And it was kind of at a point in my life where I was like, do I go to university or do I stay in the kitchen? And I was weighing up a lot of things. And my partner, Emma, who I've been with since high school, she was there at the time, and she kind of just said as well, she was like, you really come alive when you're in the kitchen. And I felt really, really drawn to everything going on in the kitchen, whether it was the sort of the relationships I had in the kitchen or it was the actual work. I was just taking so much pride from the work that I was able to produce. So yeah, from that moment, I was like, right, I signed my apprenticeship and I was heads down.
What did you take from your time with Timothy Montgomery?
Tim taught me how to cook. Tim taught me how to be a cook. Like the amount of times that he went through, he was very flavor based, and all of his food is like really big based in flavor. It was a really small kitchen, so you had nowhere to hide. You had to do everything. You couldn't, I had my wisdom teeth out one day, and I felt a need that I had to be at work the day after I had my wisdom teeth out. And I was in the kitchen just going down. He's just looking at me like, you're a complete idiot. Get out of here. Like, what are you doing? But I think that was kind of the thing where he he always put this emphasis on having a responsibility in the kitchen, having a responsibility to represent the food that you had and make it really, really delicious. So he taught me how to be a cook, definitely. And, the people that came through that kitchen, I think, can say the exact same thing. That he had some really, really great chefs go through Bacchus that are running venues in Sydney and Melbourne, all across Australia. And I think, he left fine dining and he's opened a burger shop now. And I think that's the perfect way to really, really make flavour a thing in your life, is to, have something that is so accessible like that. But also he's been so successful with it. So, yeah, I think for him, that's it.
You spent a lot of your career in Sydney as well. What led to that move?
Yes. So it was about middle of 2010. I started to look at moving to Sydney. So my partner, she was moving to Sydney when she finished uni. So we looked at, it was either overseas or Sydney. And coming from Newcastle, you either go to London to work at the Ledbury or you go to Sydney. That was kind of very hip at the time to do that. So I'd been in a few cooking competitions at the time. I'd met a lot of chefs from Sydney and came down and I trialed everywhere. So I think early on I realised, Tim had taught me how to be a cook. The next thing I needed to learn was how to be a chef. So I started looking at restaurants that I thought, they had bigger brigades. It was more focused on, the actual art of being a chef. And I thought the thing that I needed, and I determined this really on in my career, was I needed to take things from the chefs that I worked for. So I determined I wanted to work for a chef owner. That was the thing that I had to do next. Coming from Bacchus, I needed to look for a chef owner. So I went trialed in all of the best restaurants in Sydney at that time, and I had a friend working at Sepia, and he kind of got me in the back door. And it was the one stage that I had real no expectations for, because I just didn't think I was going to get a job there. And even the first day, I kind of walked in and everyone sort of was like, "Oh, hi, nice to meet you. Welcome to Sepia." That was kind of it. And even Martin was like, first time I met Martin, I was like, "Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Rhys." And he's like, "Yeah, I know you are," and shook my hand and kept walking. He was too busy. But I think I looked at the restaurants that I was working in. The one thing that was different about Sepia was Martin and Vicky were the owners, like, as well as having the Costies with them, but they were the owners and they were there every day. And I think in my first week that I was there, I saw Martin do every section, including washing dishes and things. And he doesn't spruik doing that, but he was really involved in his business. And I was like, that's who I need to spend time with now.
Take us into that kitchen. Like, Sepia's influence is incredible on the culinary landscape. But what was it like when you got the gig there and working in that kitchen? So
I started working at Sepia in November 2012, I think. Actually, yeah, it would have been first week of November 2012. I got there. They had the three hats. I think they had just won Restaurant of the Year, maybe it was the year after. I can't remember. But I was there for 6 years, so I got lots of stories, and they're based around the people who came through the restaurant. In terms of like some of my favourite memories of Sepia, I think, we got to do a lot of things that I never dreamed of doing in my career. I mean, the people that we cooked for, the actual experiences that we gave people are the things that made it really special for me. But also, I had some highlights where we cooked for the world's 50 best chefs in Melbourne. We looked at, we were named one of the world's best restaurants. We were named the one to watch. I mean, being part of that team was just absolutely incredible. And then I think about 2016, I moved up to the role of junior sous. So that was the next thing where it was like Martin really focused on turning me into a chef and teaching me how to look after the people that are in your kitchen. And I think also push them, because, everyone at Sepia was so competitive. And that was something that made us really, really good. And, I think back of some of the times that we had where we had staff meal competitions, people would cook like they'd never cooked before, just to get staff meal out, and it was all about impressing each other as well as impressing the guests. And I think that's where, you know, we were all there working in unison to produce the best restaurant that we possibly could. And I think, you know, that was a moment in time, and I miss Sepia a lot. I think it was a great restaurant.
Martin Benn is known for really pushing the realms of gastronomy. Do you have any stories of dishes or techniques that you remember from that time that sort of really surprised you?
Yeah. I mean, something that Martin did was we did a squid dish. And I remember him explaining to me when, it wouldn't have been the first time, but it would have been one of the first times that I was actually cooking the fish section. And he kind of said to me, you know, we've got a dish here that it kind of goes against the rules of what you are meant to do in cooking. You're meant to cook squid really quickly and really hot, you know. That's what the general consensus is for this. But the dish that he did, he cooked it for a long period and at a really low temperature. And it was all because he wanted to affect the texture of the squid. And I think that was something that he did really, really well, was his texture and temperature play is insane. But it also was like a visual representation of the squid. It was still in this tube. And I mean, that technique was something that we always sort of came back to talking about that, like with other chefs as well, where it was like, there was so much more to his cuisine than just what he was putting on the plate. And I think that's what he trained chefs in really, really well, was teaching them to think, not think completely outside the box, don't go crazy, because his flavors are very, very based in traditional flavors. But it was more about just think, be very, very considerate of what you're doing with your food. So that was something really good that I took from Martin.
You followed Martin and Vicky Wild to Melbourne to open a new restaurant. What was that decision like for you to make that move and change cities for a new project like that? Yeah,
I made the decision. So there was an announcement in the paper 2 years before we closed that we were closing. So there was always kind of this thing in the back of my mind, all right, so Sepia is going to end, what's the next move? I looked abroad, I looked at doing my own thing, and I kind of talked with all the chefs that I knew, and they were kind of in a similar boat. Everyone wanted, the chefs at my age, where it was that time where you either take a head chef role, you open your own restaurant, or you do something like that. Martin, I'd spent so much time working under Martin. I thought, right, this is the perfect opportunity to, take a step up, because it wasn't necessarily my name. It was I was working under Martin, and obviously Chris Lucas. And at first, the opportunity was completely different to what society is now. And I jumped at it originally, and I thought, okay, great. I'm young. I can go to Melbourne if, I do a few years working in this restaurant. We open it up. I learned how to open the restaurant, which was something that I'd already earmarked as something that I wanted to do, was to be part of a restaurant open. After learning how to, be a chef with Martin, and then I thought, okay, this is it. This is the perfect opportunity to take. I think it was 2016 when I accepted the job to be the head chef at the new restaurant. We didn't close until December 15, 2018. So it was quite actually a long and involved process. But I mean, that's what was so interesting about it, was being there from the very beginning. So seeing the kitchen be designed, seeing a menu conception come to life, seeing the hiring processes. I mean, just opening a restaurant is amazing to watch. It's painful. It's very hard when you're in it. But just seeing something start from an idea or just a chat, that was something that I really wanted to be a part of, and it was very special to be a part of that opening with Society.
Society had so many hurdles, like so many restaurants, and had opening dates that got moved and pushed, and COVID affected everything. But you also left not long after it opened. What was it like letting go of something that you'd been part of for so long?
Yeah, I was very shattered at the time. I was in two minds. I think I think I'd gotten what I'd first set out to get from society. You know, that was opening a restaurant and seeing the process of opening a restaurant. I learned so much more than I thought I was going to learn. I mean, so I moved to Melbourne 2019, and we didn't open until middle of last year. So that actual whole process, just because we had COVID setbacks, construction setbacks, meant that I worked a lot in the Lucas Group's other venues, but I also worked a lot in the business of the Lucas Group. And that was something that was really, really eye-opening to see, was how how much thought goes into the operation of their restaurants, and how much is behind it. It's a business. It's a real business, and that's what I thought was incredible. And to work with someone like Chris. I mean, the first time I did a walkthrough at the Lucas Group, I remember before I accepted the job, I did a walk around all their venues, and so you could understand what the group was. And I remember being in the office thinking, I'd spent my whole career to this point wanting to be a chef like, Martin, or like some of these great other chefs in Australia. And I remember standing there thinking, I don't know if I want to be a chef. I think I want to be like Chris Lucas. Like, he seems to have gotten it down pat with all this business and everything else. And I thought, the infrastructure behind the restaurants is like, it's unbelievable, really. It's unbelievable. And the amount of thought that goes into the marketing and the whole experience is insane. And, I didn't think I was going to learn that when I left and moved to Melbourne. But the things that I saw there, I mean, they're going to affect the decisions that I make from here on. Like, I mean, the things that I learned in that environment were insane.
You spent a lot of time with Vicky Wild and Martin Benn, wanting to sort of immerse yourself in the world of owner-operators. What is the secret behind their success that you've seen, and what did you take from your experiences with them?
The secret to their success is, I wish I knew that. I wish I knew what it was. I guess one thing is they never stop. They never ever stop, and I love that about the both of them. When you're with them, they're constantly on. I think that's what their whole life is about: restaurants. Not so much about everything else that comes with it, but it's about restaurants. And I think that was the thing that I love restaurants. I absolutely love restaurants, and that's where I want to be. And I think their whole life being about restaurants was it. That was the people that I wanted to be around. And they make a lot of big decisions. They make things that, I guess, it was a very important restaurant, Sepia, in terms of like the Sydney landscape at that time. And I think for them, the secret of that was, the people that they had under them. And, being an owner operator, being in your business every day, you spend that time with the people, so you know what's affecting them. And I guess that's something that was something that I took, was you need to have a focus on the people that are around you. You need to pick well. You need to train well, which is the big thing. But it's also just time, because you can't buy the time. You need to invest it. And that's what, being an owner operator, sometimes you don't have the choice, but you have to be there in your business. You don't have a choice.
Tell me about the Gantry. What's it been like, sort of being able to express your voice on the plate as a head chef and creating a menu for a venue in a hotel?
So yeah, this is my first gig by myself. So it was daunting, to say the least. I mean, I had a month of quiet when I first arrived, and we didn't announce anything until February. So it was good to just settle in, see it for what it was, understand what we were producing at the time and what we needed to produce. I think hotel restaurants are very, very different to the restaurant world that I'd been in up until this point. You have certain obligations where you aren't just producing food for one meal. You're open for breakfast, you're open for lunch. You have all different skill levels in the kitchen with you. And also you have people who don't necessarily want to be in restaurants. They've taken a job because this is this is a livelihood, not a passion for them. So I think that was the interesting thing to see, in terms of a hotel restaurant. But the thing that's really important for me is like, while COVID was going on, a lot of my life was affected, obviously, because we couldn't open restaurants, and being in restaurants, it wasn't about doing takeaway or anything like that. It was something that we wanted to produce in a place that you could come to and you could have a full experience. So I steered away from doing takeaway, and I steered away from doing all those sorts of things, and just tried to work on my craft as a chef. But looking at a hotel, this was kind of COVID proofing my life a little bit. This is not something that you have to be available for whatever is thrown at you, and it's 24/7. It's not just a set period. And I think that's the really interesting thing. And it's the swings and roundabouts, I guess. You don't necessarily have to make your entire meal off one table. You've got your whole day where you can have different programs throughout the hotel to, feed people. But then I think the special thing there is then we can afford to do something like the Gantry, where we can use the best produce, we can work with suppliers, and we can invest a lot of time in projects that are going to take a long time, that don't necessarily come to fruition straight away. But we have the support of the hotel. So that's kind of the special thing of being in a hotel for me, was all of those processes that you have.
Tell me about your cooking and where you're at. Do you have a dish or two on the menu at the moment that sort of speaks of sort of where you're at?
At the moment, I'm kind of actually finding my feet as a young chef, to be real. I don't think when you come directly out of working for a chef, exactly who you are yet. And it's a question that I got asked years ago. I was in an essay competition for like young chefs, and I remember some of the judges asked me, they're like, "How would you define your cuisine?" I was completely stumped at the time, because I was like, I don't know. I'm cooking someone else's food, so I couldn't even define it, even if I wanted to. And I thought about that question for ages. And the next year it came around again. I wrote another essay, and was sitting in the meeting, and the same person asked me the same question again, where she said to me, like, how would you define your cuisine? But then the next thing was, she said, if you could define your cuisine, would that be what's produced on the plate? And that was the next thing that rattled me. And I was like, okay. So I guess those two things they've been bouncing around my head for years now. So coming into this, I was like, how do I define my cuisine, and what am I actually going to do on the plate? The answer that I've kind of landed on at the moment is I'm representing everyone who I've worked with and worked for my whole entire career. So that's how I'm going to define myself at the moment as a chef, is to really, really sort of, I don't know, put the chefs that I've worked for on a pedestal, and really, really look like, present their ideal cooking methods, or their ideal flavor combinations, and but present them with something that means something to me or the place that we're in. So something that we've been working on a lot lately is a tuna dish. So I think in my time at Sepia, the tuna was on the menu, every single menu, I think, for maybe one or two times it came off, but it was always on the menu. So something that Martin said to me before we left society was, you need to create a balanced menu. You need to have items on there that are going to be interesting, but also things that you want to play with. And for me, it was like, okay, I look at how we'd done things in the past, and I thought, okay, I'm going to put tuna on there. I can't put tuna on how Martin would. So I thought, okay, how do we do it? And I remember some of my favorite things to eat at the start of meals, like I traveled through Europe extensively, and one of my favorite things was like a caprese salad. So like the tomato, the amazing burrata or the mozzarella and basil and all those sort of fresh herbaceous flavors, the acidity coming through. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do something that's tuna orientated with tomatoes because I really love that combination, and I'm going to do it so I can emulate the texture of the burrata, which is something, that I'd learnt at Sepia. And then I thought about something that I'd learnt under Tim at Bacchus, and I was like, okay, I need to think of the flavour and how we'd put it together. And that's that sort of dish that came from it. But then I really wanted to honour sort of the Japanese techniques that I'd learnt. So, and also present a different sort of dining style. So we serve the tuna with almost a side salad of pickled Japanese cucumbers, so that it is kind of it's a tuna salad, really, what it is. But it's presented very modern and thoughtfully and considered. But I think that's a reflection of everything that I've learnt to this point in my career. But it also shows where I'm trying to go now.
What surprised you about the role that you've taken on in the hotel?
I wouldn't say I'm surprised by it, but I feel really taken aback by how many people have sort of come and said, we've been waiting for you to do something for years. And I've got a great network of chefs that I've worked with for years. Like my best friends are chefs. So, and they've all kind of done things. They've all done things for themselves over the years. And I never thought of wanting to be at the front of a restaurant. I always enjoyed working under Martin or Tim or anyone that I'd worked for. And I think the one thing that I couldn't believe was the amount of support and the amount of love that I received as soon as I said I was taking this job. And I think that's the other thing, going and doing something like a hotel restaurant. People are like, this is going to be a really big job. And, the day that I was announced as taking this role, a lot of the producers that I'd worked with in my time in Melbourne or Sydney, everyone started to come out of the woodwork and get in contact. And they're like, we loved working with you in the past. Let's do this now. It's now your name on the door. So let's go for it. And I think that's been the thing that I've been really, really amazed at, is just people have literally come from everywhere to be a part of this. And, it's taken a village to get the Gantry to where it is now. And I think it's going to take even more people to get it where we want it to go. But, that's something that I've been really amazed by.
What do you love about what you do?
I love restaurants. I just love restaurants so much. I love going and eating out in a restaurant. One of my favorite things that I heard in the past few years, I think it might have been Rhys from Icebergs. He said, doesn't taste like this at home. And I keep telling people that all the time. Like, I love that sentiment, that it doesn't taste like this at home. And that's the point of restaurants is, you bring people together. It's a meeting point, but it's also, it's an event. I love just restaurants, full stop. I love eating out. I do to my partner's detriment, financial detriment. We eat out a lot. And that's just what I love, is the actual restaurant experience, not just cooking. Like, I love cooking as well, but it's the whole thing. That's what I love.
Well, Rhys, congratulations on the new gig, and very much look forward to seeing what you do as the year progresses with the Gantry. We've loved having you on Deep in the Weeds today to hear your story. Please keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
Will do. Thanks, Anthony.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.